I'm Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, and Ned asked me to do this because I know the least of anybody about this topic. I did have a station once that I'll say brand X, and it had all these cables in it, and it was a chore just to keep that station going. And I still have baskets of cables, and now I have the Flex ecosystem, and everything's under the desk, and all I have, it's like a glass cockpit. I just have monitors and a keyer, and I don't know where my microphone is, but it's around somewhere. Well, today we're going to talk about managing interfaces, station control, some test planning, and look at some metrics and how we evaluate that. And the most important thing is what we'll hopefully learn today is how to maximize the chances you'll have a good outcome of what you want here. So the moderators, that's me, and then our panelists are Gerry, who was just here, and Ned and Brian are with us today. And when you're setting up your station, what's the goal? Do you want to have just to work DX? Do you want to do local contesting? What resources do you have available? We've talked a lot today about bandwidth, but what's your financial bandwidth? How much can you afford? And if you go another 3dB, is it worth a divorce? And, we've heard today too, keep it simple and do one step at a time. And there's stations like this, that's just a rat's nest. Actually, mine looked worse than this picture. And then the lower right is like a flex station. It's just a simple Cat5 cable is all it is. Everything's virtual. And, even though it looks nice, the station on the left there, that's had all the cabling behind it. And then you have on the right, you have one radio that does SO2R. And then this is the station that Gerry mentioned a little bit ago in Malawi. It's a remote station. It's a K3, has an auto tuner, a rig interface, and a remote controlled antenna switch, and that's it. So with this, let's get started with Gerry on remote planning considerations.
So, and I mentioned this in the last hour, but the key to effective remote operation is automation on remote desktop. If it means automation on remote desktop, it means automation of your station in general. So if let's say you're a contest operator, but you want to be, when you go on a business trip, you don't want to miss a contest, you want to operate with your laptop. Well, the only way you can do that is have automation on the desktop. So whatever you can start out with, I got a dipole up, so I have no other things to control, and you just remote that, and you could still remote and operate. But as soon as you add antenna switches or rotors or amplifiers, you want those things to have remote capabilities. So for example, if you have a band-switched HF amplifier, that one's not going to work well on remote unless you want to leave it on a single band and then figure out how to turn it on and off. So the more full access you have, the better. Again, it's what's your goal? What do you want to be able to do with your station on remote? If it's just casual operating when you're traveling, well, that's kind of cool. But if you want to be a contest station, you want to make sure you have everything you need. You want power failure recovery. This is critically important, especially if your station you're remoting to is like one of the ones that I manage, which is 150 miles away from me. So what happens when the power goes off? One of the simplest things, in your computer, you want to make sure in your BIOS you set it to restart the computer if the power goes off. That's not the default. So you can get into big trouble if you don't do that. So you want to be able to turn your internet router, whatever it might be, your connection to the internet, you need a way to turn that on and off, okay? Especially because a lot of these internet devices can get hung, like in a lightning storm or when there's a power glitch, they'll hung and you lose your internet. Well, there's devices like Digital Logger's web power switch, $129 device, switches up to 8 AC outlets. But it has a feature where it'll ping an internet address like Google, and if the ping stops, it cycles the power on the router. And it'll do that continuously until it comes back, okay? So those are one of the really interesting things to save your butt if you have power problems. So you want all your rig and peripherals to perhaps be running on a UPS, so that if you have a power glitch, it might only be for a short period of time, but it comes back. In Malawi, Another device which is critically important that we use is what's called an auto transformer. And the reason why, the 220 volt power in Malawi changes from 159 to 260. This does not treat your equipment well. So an auto transformer makes that 220 constantly, and they're available. Internet, with the mumble and remote desktop internet that I have, you want to have internet redundancy if possible, okay? For example, if you have cable or fiber or any other type of internet at your home where your station is, and you want to have redundancy, well, typically in North America, you have good 4G cellular coverage. You could have a little cellular device, and you could have a way to switch to that. And if you switch to that, you're in the middle of a contest, your main internet goes down, you come back up on 4G, and you're running within seconds. And as I talked in the last, reducing latency and jitter. Now, you do that by using, in my case, and anybody wants to use it, is using mumble servers. And I have mumble servers all over the world that help you reduce latency and jitter, because those are the things that are going to break up the audio and cause issues. When you're designing a station for remote, if you have the ability to throttle what services are used, you want to make sure that your remote operators have the highest priority. Higher over your RBN or your packet feeds or anything of that nature that's external to the station. You want to make sure those remote operators have a high priority. On a DXpedition, if you're doing log uploads, which you can do automatically, you want to give log uploads a very low priority because you don't want to upset the remote team while you're doing it.
And Ned, managing interfaces?
Yeah, it's a huge topic. The stations today, it's kind of hard to draw the boundary between radios and computers and that. But what's pervasive is the need to understand what the requirements are for computers and how many and what types of interfaces are required to accomplish your task. I have gone to in my remote sites. I use very, very low end mini computers. They were originally available from Intel as a thing called the next unit of computing, NUCs. Intel has gotten out of that market. They supply material source chips for other Chinese vendors who create these devices. They're in the $150 class. I buy them by the box. As someone mentioned earlier, I pre-configure them. Actually, I install a zip file with all of the installation software, all the software I use, so that when it's time for me to run out to my remote to replace a computer, I can quickly, on the bench in an hour, install all the software and get it configured for whatever position it is out in the site. But because the demand on computers even for FT8 these days with i5, i7 PCs they're perfectly capable for handling the max tasks for signal processing and logging and everything else that we do. Having bigger, more powerful computers is fine. It's just not essential. There's no sense spending the money. I migrated to, with some influence, I went to a very high-end Dell computer. As it turns out, it's fine, except it has a unique characteristic that after a OS push, I had to cycle power more than once to get it to actually recover. That took me a couple of trips out there to sort that out. So find what works and stick with it as long as you can until it stops working, and then find something else that works. Things are changing so quickly, it's kind of hard to keep current. You can't buy the same PC this year that you bought last year. It may be of value to buy a lot of cheap computers to have on standby. That way you have a consistent configuration for a while, but you got to be ready for for updating. Radios, it's a personal thing. I know, you know, you grow up and you find a radio you love and you stick with that brand for the rest of your life for a long time until as long as they are. And you learn to know how to manage them, locally, how to control the operation of the radio, and then remotely, once you get comfortable with like a Kenwood or ICOM or whatever, that you probably stick with that. They're all fine. And as I talked earlier about IP radios, that's a unique characteristic that's related to if you want to stuff it in a rib. But if you're just operating your station at home and then want to remote into it, all radios are fine that are controlled by software through the interfaces. I know that there's a huge amount of work that's done by teams out there, and I can't remember, a ham lab community that manages interfaces. I know that WSJTX and other software relies on this ham lib collection of information that is the ultimate tool to make sure that software can access every radio that's currently used by the ham community. And there's a lot of them. I mean, there's, I don't know, 40, 50 versions of ICOMs, and you know, it's just a massive amount of work to manage that interface. And thank God there are these volunteers who work tirelessly and patiently with the community every time there's a new radio or a new piece of software or some new weird thing that happens with the next version of Unix. That they work and solve the problem and make sure that everybody can control their radios. So you sort of have to be patient, and if you're a new user, you might find somebody locally who can help you. If you join a user group and you say, tell me how to start, you're tying everybody up. You get fluent by somebody local who's got a lot of bandwidth. Most of the troubleshooting you do on these user groups are really new problems that popped up following an OS push or some new radio that came on the market that's never been used before. But there are people out there that will help you with the interfaces. You got to know your brand. You got to, like I had talked earlier about some of the incompatibilities between how a Yaesu might have been designed for remote operation and how a Elecraft is designed for remote operation. It all depends on their marketing, with their audience is, and who they're going to try to tailor their product to meet. Remote operation is a new demand for users. It will take time for common standards to be met by all radios. Right now, there's a variance in how radios respond, are designed to operate with like remote Vox. It's a simple thing, important for remote operations. Nobody likes push to talk in a contest or a DXpedition. Vox is essential, but not all radios work the same. And so you need to know what it is your radio does. Okay, so if you're going to take your home station and remote it, you're really going to rely on your home PC to manage all the interfaces. It's really the best way to go, in my experience, is to remote into your home station is just have a laptop or some inexpensive PC that gets the desktop of your home PC available to you. That way you can control your station just like you're at home. That works well. Remote stations are a little different in that they're highly automated things. I know my remote system in eastern Arizona, I've got it's a multi-tube contest capable station with lots and lots of antenna flexibility, but it's not there's one member of our team who's not technically competent. In fact, it would be measured involving negative numbers, and we always make a joke about it, the station, whether or not it's Fred proof, where if he could operate it for an hour and not screw it up. So that's a requirement. And sometimes you have to manage the flexibility of the station so that it only does, that all antennas are controlled when you change bands, all the antennas switch. You don't have to have any other knowledge than using N1mm just like it always is, and have the station react to what it is you're trying to do. Now, having multiple antennas in that is something we are introducing, and it is available through the remote interface, but it involves a lot of training, and we've talked a bit in the past about the absolute need for that. Before you let someone loose on your station, you need to make sure they will use it in a range that it's safe to use. Remote de-expeditions are completely different. They are very much under a tight control of the control operator. You've heard George talk about that all day, about nothing can change because you have so many operators that come in, and you got to make sure that it's consistent for everybody when they gain access to that. Is this mine too?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so one of the important things I've learned is that when you start using remote stations, you build a log, okay? What's important is that the logging data has to include information like where this station is. Let's talk about a single thing. What grid square is your station in? And why is that important? Well, on 6 meters, everybody chases the Fred Fish Award or chases grid squares. And so important to make sure that the log entry, logs that you upload are signed with the appropriate QTH information and to be accepted by the log of the world. Unfortunately, that means there's 2 ways to do that now. One of the recent changes to the ADIF standard is that now you can include in the log record what grid square you are in, the transmitter was in when you made the QSO. Unfortunately, nobody uses that. Word has to get out that it's there. So what would be neat is if in N1mm, if you said, hey, I'm located in DM52, every QSO made on that in that logging app would have DM52 in that field. Unfortunately, that field doesn't exist in the log produced by N1mm. And the only way to have log of the world know what grid you're in is to sign it with a QTH file or signature block or whatever for encoding the upload. Which means you have to manage each file differently. So when you use the TQSL application, you have to sign logs from this station, different location than logs from that station, which means you have to have logs with different names, and it's a little mind-numbing, but that's the discipline you have to have if you want to be accurate and indicating where you were when you made a QSO, and that includes state and county and all the other stuff involved in the QTH header. You have to manage files right now, and it would be so neat if you could create log records that had the information in it, because when Log of the World reads a QSO record, the data that's in the QTH or state or my state or my grid or my county field in the ADIF record overrides what was in the header that signed the log. So in an ideal world, you could have all your logs from all remote operations anywhere. If the log was generated with the data, with the location data in the field, it would be cool. Then you wouldn't have to keep track of what file it is. Right now, you have to separate logs from different sites in different ways and sign them differently, and it's the way of the world going forward, because every award tracking system has important information you need to know, because QSOs to apply for this award have to be within 100 miles or whatever it is, some radius from your home QTH or something, and they're all different for all these different award systems. So as we start using remote stations and creating logs at those remote stations, we have a new problem, which is managing that information and properly uploading it to Log of the World so that it complies with all of the awards programs that we all try to run. So it's something that's not trivial. Every chance I get, I remind people of all this, and I hope someday soon logging software people will start putting in my QSO data into the log records, and this will all go away. I'm going to now talk about a little bit about roadblocks. We've talked all day about latency and bandwidth. Something about remotes that always has been interesting to me is the fact that things happen out there that you don't know about because you're not there. I mean, one thing obviously is weather. You don't live there, but after being a maintainer of a site out there for a couple of years, you realize why nobody lives out there, because the weather is horrible. The winds frequently get to 100 miles an hour. It freezes. It's 120. It's all of that, and it affects things. Another thing is that things will stop working in RFI problems, and it's very hard to troubleshoot because you're not there when it happens. And so something that we've learned finally, we just, some subtle change out the site, they changed the way the power was routed into the building, created a massive pile of RFI problems, and we had to go out there with sacks of ferrites and snap them on everything, and it stopped. We have no idea what fixed it, but we don't care. We have fixed it today, and we have bags of ferrites out there when it breaks again, so whatever reason. The other thing that's annoying out there is OS updates. Something that's really vital is the audio interface. That's a big problem. Right now, if you buy a cheap PC that's got an audio jack on it, and you turn on your PC and you don't have anything plugged into that audio jack, it doesn't recognize an audio interface on the PC on the device list until you plug something in, and it's like a two-step process. You plug something in and you answer a Q&A session about what did you just plug in, and you say, okay, it's a headset. All right, so when there's an OS push and you have that headset plugged in, after the OS push is done, the PC has no idea what you plugged into that jack, and so you have to get in your truck, drive for 4 hours, unplug that jack, plug it back in, answer the QA session, drive home, and then use your remote station. So we have stopped using the onboard chipset, anything that's on board, because of this problem. So we have all off-board audio interfaces for that very reason, because they don't have that problem. And you buy old ones that don't ever have drivers updated that get changed in an OS push. So find your favorite audio card and live with it, and try to avoid the onboard chip audio sets. It's asking for trouble.
And now you can tell us how to make it Fred-proof.
Yeah, yeah. Send Fred out there to unplug it, and plug it back in. Documentation. All right, I'm a retired electrical engineer, and I love making drawings, documents, and I love them because I learned that I forget what I did yesterday unless I wrote down what it is I did yesterday, and these stations get so complex that sometimes you just don't remember what it is you got.
I'll remember that.
Yeah. So I have a set of they're kept in a separate vault where I keep the latest version of my station, and I probably make 20 variations a year on that document, and I give a date and a name of these things so I don't lose track of what's the current one, because things have to change all the time, and that's okay. You just have to capture it. And when you try to make a change to a remote site station, big bang ideas are terrible. The best approach I've found is to change one thing at a time and see how that worked, and change something else. Because if you start making more than one change and it stops working, you have no idea which change did it. And you have to be careful that you don't lose the thread and never get back to a configuration that worked. And again, that's part of change management, is to make sure that every time you do a change to anything, capture it, update your documents so that somebody besides you has a chance of fixing it at some point. The other thing is can you break it? Okay, so back to my remote mission. I go to our remote site. We used to drive, but now I have a good friend who can fly, and he's my new best friend. We now fly a 45-minute flight from an airport right across the street from my house that I used to bitch and moan at because the airplanes took over my head. But now I love it because one of those airplanes is me flying out to the remote site. But we go out there, we do some things, we make a change, and then you go, okay, did I break anything? So a ritual we have is somebody back at home accesses our station we're standing in front of, and they test it on every band, every mode, every antenna, not every antenna direction, but every combination of things, just to make we didn't undo something that we did before we jump in our buggy and go home. Because George's trips back to the island far too often, it's a big, it affects your psyche. You know, you start to hate the thing that's taken over your life, but you just need to have a ritual that guarantees success every time you do a remote. And like I said before, operator training is key. Anytime you add something new, you bring it out and you test it in a low stress environment, some state QSO party, something, and then before you go hot for CQ Worldwide, CW or something like that. So count on their, using your station in less stressful situations before you plan on going hot.
And Brian.
Hi folks, I don't know if you know me, I'm N9ADG. A few years ago, I was the editor of the ARRL contest update for about 6 years. Since then, I've been hanging out with Rob N7QT, going on some DXpeditions, including Palau, which I operated remotely from due to a last minute thing. H44, which did get to go to that one, supported him remotely with his H40 activities. I'm also on the WSJTX software development team. So if you're using Foxhound and you're the DXpeditioner, or whether it's small, medium, or large DXpeditions, I help out in that area. And sometimes I'll even supply hot fixes to the software to DXpeditions if necessary. And if you are involved in a DXpedition, small, medium, or large, sometimes I support K7AR and W7YAQ on their two-man operations to the South Pacific. Get them new versions too when they encounter bugs. Look me up. But anyway, my job is to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I've found, both from personal and working with some of these DXpeditions, that you might be able to take home for your small, medium, or large operations, whether it's for contesting or for DXpeditioning. Basically, in this day and age where your computer runs so many things in your ham shack, you really should be cognizant of the load that's being placed upon it, not just when it's sitting there logging your own contacts and making contacts by itself, but if you're going on a DXpedition, even if it's 2 people to the South Pacific, and you're putting in a few thousand queues, as someone mentioned on this board this morning, the characteristics of the way your computer is and the demands being placed upon it when you have 10,000 queues in your N1MM database is much different than when it's just a few hundred queues in your log in the current instant, in your current logging, in your current contest. So you should really consider whether you need to beef up your computer and whether it's a prudent decision to buy the least expensive computer you can. I'd suggest really examining the data requirements for your computer and talk to some folks who have been on some larger DXpeditions or the size of the DXpedition that you're encompassing. To see that when you're running WSJTX or your other WSJTX compatible software, and your logger, and you're uploading spots, and you're taking down spots, and you're communicating with 3 or 4 other computers, whether your CPU is being utilized and whether your network is being utilized or saturated. There are built-in tools in your operating system that can guide you to understanding what's going on. If you're doing when you're going on a DXpedition, or even going on maybe a small activation for a county line or something, it's almost, well, it actually is a requirement to have networked operations. You're going to pay the tax now in setting up a network and have the computers talk to one another, or later on when you're doing your log processing and QSLing, you're going to be spending time sorting queues and coordinating logs. And between you and me, after the de-expedition, I want to do as little log processing as possible. I want it to be all done by the time maybe we land. So if there are a few things that need to be tidied up where a computer was offline for a little while or what have you, that still is taken care of. So then once it's shipped off to LOTW or your QSL manager or whatever online QSO system you're using, you don't have to think about it too much. You can handle the exceptions, the few exceptions that you should have if you've had good data hygiene. Next slide. So from a de-expedition station perspective, some things that we've learned over time, even with small de-expeditions where it's like bring your own computer kind of thing, that sometimes is a bad idea. What you really want to do, rather than just bringing the computer that you have lying around and Joe brings his computer and Mary brings her computer, you really want to have the same of everything. You want to have the same operating system. You want to have the same software. You want to have the same version. You want to have the same version of the software. You want to have, if you're running N1MM, you want to make sure you're running the same version of all the databases, the country file, the super check partial database. You want all that stuff to be the same. You want to make sure that it's all configured before you leave. There have been some folks who have said, oh, well, we'll just start all in a container and we'll sort it out when we get there. Well, you could do that. You'll be spending a lot of time doing that. Maybe not the best thing. You should also maybe consider mocking up your operation before you go. And what I mean by that is if you anticipate being somewhere where you're going to make 10 or 20,000 queues in 3 days, maybe you're going to go to VP5 or something on a big contest, you should try loading up a database that's got 10 or 20,000 queues and finding a busy contest before your contest weekend and setting your N1MM configuration up to receive all the spots so that while this massive amount of spots coming in, it's coloring up your band maps to see which are the mults and which aren't the mults. You'll see how much CPU you're using and whether or not the thing's fallen down. So you should do that testing and emulating it with not only the equipment, not only the software, but also some of the simulated data and the size of that data that you might have. I've also encountered the case where, perhaps in some remote operations, where people have signed up to be a remote operator who've never or have very infrequently used some of the newer digital modes, thinking that it's really easy. And it can be really easy, but if you're not familiar with the user interfaces or the quirks and peculiarities of sometimes the software where people make bad decisions about where to put buttons, you probably won't have the highest rates that you can on your de-expedition. Make sure the folks that are trained up and know how to use the software. Another small thing that some people overlook, although I think it was mentioned this morning, if you're doing outreach and wanting people to work you, make sure you publicize your band plans, where you're going to be, when you're going to be, what your fallback is, that if another de-expedition starts up in the place that you were, where your secondary is going to be. It's the Plan A, Plan B, Plan C issue that I think Adrian discussed this morning. Always be ready to go to the next contingency and publish them so people know, oh, they couldn't be on their main frequency because these other folks are there, they must be on their backup. And you should also plan for other scenarios that or situations that you may encounter, such as if you have DQRM, what's your de-expedition policy for how you handle those situations? How do you handle people maybe omitting elements from their calls so that they are getting worked when you're calling for different areas of the world? And how do you handle operators that are misbehaving? Make sure it's consistent among all your ops and everyone understands what the plan is. What happens if you have a solar blackout? What are you going to do? How do you announce that? Hopefully you're updating your website and people are looking there. And also, how are you going to change your operating plan when the generator that you purchased 2 years ago and found that it had no RFI, when you bought the exact same model for this DXpedition and didn't check it? It turns out that they did a parts substitution and it does have RFI. How are you going to modify your low band operation when you can't hear anyone calling? Stuff like that. And then during your DXpedition, you can save a lot of time in a bunch of ways. One of which is make sure you're doing periodic backups. It's unfortunate that we see messages even today where it's, oh, we lost a day of logs, so we got to find them. You know, you want to avoid things like that. Make sure you have multiple backups. Make sure you have a mechanism for putting it not only on the computers, not only on all the computers, but also on small memory sticks. And take the time to do that. You know, it's a little bit of maintenance, but you just want to make sure that you're not spending a lot of time later. You should keep track of your metrics to support your DXpedition goals. Maybe if you're 2 people on a trip to the Pacific, it's not so much of a deal, but if you're on a contest weekend, say to the Caribbean, you probably are checking, hey, you know, we're missing the mults on 10 meters, we really want to be there. Or if you're looking on a medium-sized DXpedition, you want to examine, have I listened for South America enough? Are we hearing any Africans? We want to work those, as many of those as possible. What's our strategy for holding off the hordes of the close-in operators and trying to get the farther places on the gray line? So you should really understand how to look at your stats using, say, N1MM and whether they're meeting your DXpedition goals. And certainly, you kind of have to decide where you want to put the gauge on we're really serious about this and it might suck for a while until it becomes fun at the end when we forget all the bad parts, to, oh, it's holiday style and we'll work people when we can. You got to figure out where the DXpedition needs to be or your contest operation needs to be from that perspective. So, on your metrics, if you're collecting these things, certainly on some operations it's, hey, nothing broke, we made a bunch of queues, we're good. That's one way to measure, but other times you want to break it down in the form of, gee, which continents did we work the most of? How many all-time new ones did we supply to people, and versus the total queues? Did our antennas work? We had this plan where we thought we would be at this place for this opening. Was it really there? So that can inform not only your operation if you do this on a daily basis or multiple times per day, how it can inform your future days of operation, but in the future, if you're doing planning, whether those assumptions that you're making are going to continue to be correct. If you're on a holiday-style DXpedition, I saw these guys who were off the coast of Australia having a great time, their first DXpedition ever. They measured it, the number of QSOs per beverage. And I thought that was a really good metric for them to have. But if you really want to benchmark, you could go do a little research and see how you're doing against the folks who activated that entity about the same spot in the sunspot cycle as you are in the past. To see, what are you doing differently? Do you have more or fewer ops? Are you making more or fewer QSOs? How many stations do you have on the air versus them? And ultimately, at the end of the DXpedition, if you're doing a DXpedition, did you move the most wanted entity status further down the list? Did you move the needle? And that's the needle in a lot of ways. You should probably understand these goals that you have set before you go out on your DXpedition. But even more than that, I've done sweepstakes before, say for K7IR, and some of us really want to be serious and try to win, and other of us really are more there for, hey, we're getting the guys together. This is the equivalent of our fall trip out into the woods. We're going to go bag some cues. So you really want to have a kind of an agreement of everyone on the team, because as everyone's expectations and the goals are aligned, it is more fun and there won't be more friction between team members, which is how you get sometimes that friction. You get creative phonetics, like K7XH becomes K7 extremely hostile. And don't forget, measure and review your metrics beforehand, to establish them. Maybe measure them at op change or at periodic times during the day, but also at the end of the contest or your DXpedition, take time to reflect on what went right and also what went wrong. So that you can document it for next time. And do it soon after your operation. Sometimes in the airport, while you're being delayed for almost 2 days trying to get back. Or, sometimes over email or Slack, as the case may warrant.
Gerry.
So, evaluation of remote operations. So, was it reproducible? Can you do it again? And can you do it multiple times? Is it self-healing? Can it recover when there's an issue? And user test sessions. So I'll speak to one contest station that I operate remotely quite a bit, and that's Stan Stockton Station, ZF9CW, which is a fairly small station, but it's well built. We know it's documented well. When we decided to remote it, the first time it took maybe an hour or two to get remote working. It worked. And we decided then after we had a station do a single op remote there, and he did well. But then we wanted to do multi-op, and Stan's QTH in the Caymans is small. It's about a 900 square foot house, so you can't have a ton of operators in it. And we wanted to do a multi-single. So we did a multi-single first year with 4 guys at his station and me remote. And again, we took the same remote technology and put it in place, and we used it in a contest, and it was 100% reproducible, and it worked. And we won the world from there in our class. We did the same thing the following year, and again we won it in the world with me as a remote op. Then we decided, he decided, a little crazy, that we wanted to do multi, high power from his QTH. Again, 900 square feet. He has lots of antennas, 2 towers, and very good antenna system. But we said, hey, we can do multi with 3 stations, because not all bands are open all the time. But this time we needed more operators, so we had 5 at the station. And we had 2 operators remote. Kevin N5DX was in Arkansas, and I was in New Hampshire. Worked flawlessly. It was reproducible. We could have remote operators switch to be local, switch between remote and local operators, and it worked flawlessly. And again, with claim score and ARRL DXCW, we won the world multi. So these steps are important to do.
Well, the disadvantage is you didn't get a chance to go to the beach.
I went later in person and went to the beach.
Well, the takeaways from this session are, know the goal. What do you want to accomplish? You have a simple station, complex, multi-tube, multi. Do you just want to operate your station remote from wherever you are in the world? And, know your brand of radio and the strengths and weaknesses of it, and do 1 step at a time, because if you take 2 steps at a time, you're going to break 3 things, and you'll never find out what you really broke and how to fix it. So that's why documentation is really important. Any questions about this session? Yes?
Hello, Mark, WB6CIA. I haven't heard a lot of talk about ups. Do you guys use ups on your stations, or you just depend on things going down and coming back up properly when the power comes back on?
UPSs.
Yeah, I use them at a couple of stations. I find them very important if you have any issues with power failure. We use them in Vermont, we use them in Malawi. It just allows everything to come up and down smoothly and prevent glitches, so they're very useful.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Can I mention one thing?
Sure.
Ned, thanks for recognizing the ham lib library. I'd like to point out that one of the principal person behind it, Michael Black, W9MDB, is a recent silent key. So that was unexpected, perhaps not by him, but he certainly wasn't very public about his battle with ALS. And if you have expertise and are willing to devote some time or resources, I'm sure that the HamLib folks would like to hear from you, because it was and continues to be a big job to support all of the rigs that come out with some of your favorite software, including WSJTX, including JS8Call, anything that uses HamLib, and that includes some of the free loggers. So that's a big hole, and it's a problem with our supply chain for open source ham radio software.
Okay, well, we'll adjourn and meet back at the top of the hour for our last session.